Hi there, it's Marcus Bussey here. I'm really happy to be able to say a few words about Neohumanism, and I hope that what I say has some use value to you, not only because getting the ideas is important, but also because our day-to-day work with children is absolutely critical at this time in world history, as we sort of walk the tightrope, you might say, between what is wonderfully possible in our culture and civilization, given our technologies, given our range of human understandings, now given the rising in consciousness that everything from Black Lives Matters through to Me Too and all the rest have presented us with, and rising spiritual consciousness too. A sense that the material world is not able to satisfy our needs. So all this is happening at the same time as we have COVID, we have rising sort of racist and nationalist paranoia, and a range of very unpleasant side effects, as of course consciousness doesn't grow just simply like a pretty flower in the garden. It grows through struggle and engagement with the big questions. And then we are faced with the choice of, do I run away and hide in some old shell that's this is a white Australian shell, or a patriarchal male shell, or playing certain convenient and conventional roles that help us feel safe at one level, but actually really restrict our human potential. This is the moment we face. And as educators working with young people, it's critical for us to actually get a grip on this, but also to understand that there are plenty of tools available to us, and Neohumanism is one such tool. I'm going to draw on the curricular thinking that has been occurring at the River School over the past 5 to 10 years, particularly, but of course been going on for much longer than that, as the River School started in the mid-1990s. I'm going to be drawing on a manual on Neohumanism that Dr. Michael Towsey prepared for the school, and in consultation with the school over quite a number of years. So I'm going to turn to that in a moment and walk you through some of the key ideas there and link them up with the way I see Neohumanism as a life practice. Actually, I can't confine it to a set of rules or a curriculum formula or anything like that. For me, my teaching, and I think all good teaching, is where we meet people as people, and we come in as, at some level, the curriculum. And that's really important to understand. We can't teach from places that we've not actually journeyed to and through. We can't teach about values and virtues and about the spirit without actually having plumbed our own spirit, asked the deeper questions, and tried to work things out, not just as individuals, but as individuals in collectivities, individuals in community. We don't exist in a bubble, of course. So we've inherited a kind of Western materialist culture in Australia particularly, but I think it's become more of a dominant culture globally because of capitalism and also colonialism. But, beyond that, there's always the other. And that other is what people have been saying for, forever. It was what got Buddha up out of bed and made him leave home and go wandering around and subject himself to the austerities of forest life before he found the middle way, which has now become Buddhism. This kind of thing that gets people up, moving people. Something moves us, something animates us and gives us that bigger sense that there's something out there, and we often can't put words to it. And maybe words are unnecessary. Maybe standing in a forest, watching a sunset, looking at the stars, listening to a beautiful song, enjoying a good meal, enjoying company and community. Maybe these things are signposts too. Possibly even more important signposts than the text-based ones where we pick up a book and say, this is the book and this has got all the rules. No, Neohumanism is heart-led. It grows out of our lives, and it's an awareness of community and connection. So having said all of that as a kind of little introduction, I'm going to flick over now and start sharing my screen. and walk you through a few thoughts, okay? So again, it's really great to be able to present some key points on neo-humanism. And as I said, I'm going to draw on Michael Towsey's wonderful work on neo-humanist principles, which he's put together as a manual for the River School. So 2 points that he makes at the beginning of the manual is that neo-humanist education is an education for the whole child, okay? That is for the physical, mental, and spiritual child. And so it involves doing, it involves knowing or learning, and it also involves being, entering and being present in oneself, one's own inner world, as he terms it. He also says that neo-humanism identifies 6 qualities or characteristics that are essential to achieving this whole child experience. So, to quote now from the text itself, our schools endeavour to cultivate 6 qualities within their students. The verb to cultivate is used deliberately. It means to nurture from seed all the way through to adult life. Education does not stop when one leaves school, he points out. It's a lifelong endeavour. What neo-humanist schools do is plant seeds and care for the seedlings. Especially in the early childhood arena, that's exactly what you're doing. And don't forget that cultivate involves a core word, cult. Cult, of course, means woo, submitting oneself to some sort of brainwashing experiment, but it also means just the simple practices of life. Culture, that deep word that we all value highly, especially as educators, is, another, what we would call a cognate of that term. Cultivate, culture, okay? We are seeking to develop in our schools a culture of benevolence, a culture of a certain kind of thinking, rationality and awareness, a mental awareness, a heart awareness, and also I think a social justice awareness for what it means to be human beings. We're seeking to describe a new form of the human, hence neo-human, new human. Okay, so let's move on then. So let's look at the first 3 qualities, because they really fall into 2 sections, the 3 qualities of heart, mind, and community. And here I'm just suggesting a few points or ways that I've actually approached, let's say, expansion of the heart. So the first 3 qualities are about expansion. This is a key yogic philosophy, actually, of Vishtara, that expansion. And, it's a way of seeing human potential as actually limitless and endless. Despite all the cultural, all the historical, all the personal, all the biological limitations we may face, the yogic vision of the human being is one of ultimate limitlessness, all right? And that's where the ideas of nirvana, samadhi, and so on, that merging with the great spirit, I guess, Buddha consciousness. This is all sort of what we see as a terminus, as an end point. Of course, we never get there. The whole point, of course, is not the end point at all. It's the journey. And that's what makes us all human, of course, and it's what makes being human so interesting, even if it is sometimes so desperately frustrating and difficult, okay? So, for me, expansion of heart, some of the things that I've done in my journey as an educator, as stories and imagination, telling stories. You get people in with a story. A story is something I'm even trying to tell now, in a sense, even though it's more of a narrative around what it is to be neo-human or neo-humanist. Okay, with stories and imagination comes game and play. Okay, children understand and learn through play. It's really important to keep play as a central tenet of all that we do. But we can play and we can play. Sometimes children can play because adults model it all the time, play hardball. But we need to look at play that's cooperative, that encourage us to be our best, not necessarily to win, all right? But there's also other things, and children are very amenable to quiet time, to introspection, and even sometimes meditation, but it needs to be You know, just snap here, a little bit there. I've managed to program quiet time into classes, but I was working with kids a bit older than the ones you are. But, you know, if you just had a little bell in the room and a child went and rang it, and for 30 seconds, every child would sit still and just observe something in front of them. There are different ways that we can play with that quiet time, that introspection and meditation. And of course, through cultivating environments that bring children into the environment, there's this love of the world, or love for the world, devotion. Okay, so expand devotional experience. Devotion is actually the fuel in the tank that energizes the neo-humanist journey. And of course, as adults, we have to be devoted to the world ourselves. There's no way we can sort of legislate. You've got to love that tree. You've got to love that animal. You've got to love the flower or the air or the sun or the whatever it might be. It doesn't work like that. We've got to feel it, that feeling. And this is part of cultivation culture. It's about developing a culture that is benevolent and loving. It's about feeling good. And of course, where do we feel good? Well, you might feel good on the beach or in nature or in a museum or at a music concert or around the kitchen table with your family, feeling good holding your grandma's hand, or feeling good just hanging out with people that you resonate with, or hanging out with yourself on your own, sitting down and meditating for a period of time. This is the stuff that actually works from the heart. So expansion of mind goes along with that, okay? The human mind is innately curious. And it's often been the case, unfortunately, that culture and even education shuts down that curiosity by making things right and wrong and generating fear about being wrong or risk-taking with our thinking. So here, the arts and the sciences are key, bringing in fascinating and curiosity-inspiring objects to the classroom or whatever it might be, playing with puzzles and play, of course, again. Curiosity via asking questions and provocations, and also, of course, key to it is actually listening and I guess, provoking questions in the children themselves. So you can follow their questioning and they follow it, of course, themselves. So you structure and you build questioning, inquiry-based learning opportunities. Some of this questioning and some of this mental work involves ethics. This right? Is this wrong? When a child maybe takes another child's toy, you can actually work the mental terrain with them, the intellectual, the rational terrain with them, by asking questions about the ethics of that. Is it right just because you're a slightly bigger child or the more aggressive child? Is it right for you to take such and such as toy, or whatever it might be? And again, there's a form of inquiry base there. So the mind is curious. And if you feed it the correct tools, it's another point coming up actually, but if we feed the mind the correct tools, give them the structures to reflect on the world in a way that's going to promote a benevolent mind, a curious mind, then we're on the way. Now, all of this happens in communities. So expansion of community. One of the things that human beings are is obviously, you know, we're very tribal. We love our spot on the planet. You know, you're all Melbourneites, I'm assuming, but some of you are probably from quite different ethnic and cultural backgrounds. But Melbourne is a melting pot, like all big cities are. And so we have different allegiances to family, to community, to the neighbourhood, and so on. But we also have allegiances to the, let's say, the non-human, the more than human environment. We can feel these allegiances when we're down, as I've already said, at the beach or in the forests or in, you know, places where nature is much more, I guess, overt and in your face. Okay, so those kinds of senses of belonging and community are part of an awareness of our belonging to communities that are greater than human, that expand our humanity. Collaborative activities help us, service help us in cultivating these things, a sense of belonging in relationship, moving from individual family through larger and larger community awareness circles, you could say. to a sense of us being part of communities. We're part of communities whether we like it or not. COVID has proved that very much. You know, we live in a world in which we share the world with viruses and bacteria and so on. So the first three qualities are all about expansion, and there are lots of things that we can do to foster that expansion. So then what are the tools that are available to us? Well, there's looking at the virtues, there's developing rationality, which is what I was referring to when I talked about mental techniques or strategies for reflecting and expanding on the mind, and looking at harmony, the inner and the outer, or in balance. So let's have a look at virtue for a moment. So the first three are innate. These ones are more cultural processes. These are things that children need to learn. And of course, we need to learn them too. We don't stop learning. It's a key principle to learning, of course, is that you don't stop learning. But being an early childhood teacher is an opportunity to learn about ourselves and our learning assumptions and our own learning values. It's really worth reflecting on that. So we can teach the virtues. The River School uses the Virtues Project. There are 52 virtues, virtue for every day, every week, should I say. You know, and you know, these virtues we talk about, we demonstrate them, we role play them, we tell stories about them, we practice them, of course. How do we practice kindness, sweet speech, or what we would call satya? How do we practice non-greed, sharing? In other words, moving away from avarice. How do we practice generosity? Okay, and these all link to the three expansions, of course, because all of these grow out of heart. I feel at the heart level the need to be sharing and equitable. I feel the good feelings that come from collaboration, from being part of community, and so on. I have the mental structures, the expansion of mind structures to understand that virtues are qualities that I cultivate. Sweet speech, for instance. How do we get children to talk to one another in ways that are clearly respectful, inclusive, perhaps non-judgmental? You could even go that far. So these are important things. So we can practice these. And of course, in the community, expansion of community, virtues are absolutely essential at cultivating and promoting strong community awareness and a sense of expansive belonging. The virtue of non-harm, or ahimsa, can be carried, as Mahatma Gandhi showed, for instance, all the way through to animals and trees. We do the least harm we can in the world, understanding, of course, that world is a place in which energies shift. In other words, I need to eat. I need to eat food in order to maintain my body. But what kind of food? Do I eat food? Do I eat animal flesh that's being, where these poor animals are being forced through chicken battery farms, or, you know, in a high intensity feedlots? People whom I know, some, you know, say, no, we're never going to eat meat like that, but we will eat meat that's I've grown at home, my own chooks. And then there will be other people that I know who say, no, I'm not going to eat chooks at all. We might eat their eggs. And then, oh, no, we're not going to eat their eggs. We're going to actually only eat plant food. And then they're going to go, oh, some people go down to the other end, to the vegan end, and say, okay, we're not going to eat anything that's relied on animals at all, whether it even be bees or whatever. Okay, so we have a kind of continuum here, but the continuum, it's the journey that matters so much to us as neo-humanists. Okay, consciousness doesn't just happen like that. Consciousness is practiced. So the ethical decisions we make need to be rational. And this is where questioning and modeling comes in, this plank here, rationality. We need to look at its link to the virtues and the ethics, as I was describing. It's practiced through the three expansions of the previous slide. And of course, it's around the rationality of love and benevolence. And this is really important. And it's a work in progress. You know, it's kind of like, it's very easy to, in our Western way of thinking, to think in absolutes. And that those absolutes can be quite constraining, and they actually work against limitlessness or that expansion that we want. We actually need to understand that neo-humanism is a process of learning to be rational and learning to reflect. And that brings us to this last point, this last tool, harmony, introspection, making one's own thoughts and assumptions visible to oneself. I'm lucky to be constantly challenged by the work environments that I live in. It's quite tiring sometimes, but you know, I'm challenged by the people who walk the journey with me to think about things and come back to my assumptions and my decisions and saying, hang on a second, okay, how important is that particular principle to me in this particular context? I have to think about my thinking. I have to think about my rationality. I have to think about the virtues that are at work. I have to think about the other humans and more than humans, non-humans, and so on that inhabit the world around me that these assumptions of mine may be impacting on. Some of that is an inner process of just stirring the pot. I close my eyes and I meditate. And I think of, well, I don't think in the rational sense. I practice a mental internal process. That mental internal process has a specific name. In Sanskrit, it's sadhana, which means struggle or effort. Okay, but this whole toolbox that I'm talking about here all involve effort and struggle. So our sadhana is not just sit down and meditate. It's actually the whole process of living and breathing our work towards, our struggles towards being neo-humanist and applying neo-humanist principles in our own work environments with other human beings and the more than human. If you have mice or rabbits or goldfish in your classrooms or whatever you have, the flowers outside, or the children planting seeds for the springtime now, and so on. You know, these are all things that involve a level of inner introspection. And, you know, that introspection opens us up to the constant renewal of our own situation in the world. You need, as teachers, not to drag yourself over the hot ashes of critical self-criticism, but to be critically aware. One of the things in Michael's work with this neo-humanist manual is that he talks about critical thinking as not as I'm being critical of somebody else or of myself, but as a way of being aware of one's own thoughts. So he's using a very distinctive educational or pedagogical term here. To be critically aware of one's own thinking begins the journey of rediscovery of self and opportunities in our own teaching. So that brings me to some of the last points here, or the last points that I really want to make for this short talk. So two statements from this manual by Michael. I'm going to read them to you because I think it's good to hear these things. From the neo-humanist point of view, the first three themes, expansion of heart, mind, and community, okay, they represent innate things. I've already said that, haven't I? Innate human longings. They are latent in all children and define what it is to be human. Collectively, they give a meaning and a purpose to life. He then goes on to point out, by contrast, the last three themes, virtue, rationality, and harmony of one's inner and outer worlds, they're not innate. Rather, they are foundation skills that must be learned. Collectively, they breathe vitality into the child's life. The logic then is to find purpose and vitality in life is the first step to realizing one's potential and to leading a fulfilled life. This is the desired outcome of a neo-humanist education. So purpose and meaning grow from our innate aspirations of expansion. One of the interesting rages that I see in adults as well as the very young is a sense that we are being limited, that there are forces at work in the world that hold us down, close us in, be they cultural forces, social forces, psychological forces, emotional forces, wherever you want to point the finger, you know, and probably a whole constellation of those. One of the things that I think creates anger and rage in human beings is the sense that either life is meaningless or I am constantly being shut down, that I'm not fulfilling my potential. Okay, so to understand that if we as adults working with children can reduce the pressures on a young human being's emerging awareness of the world and give them a sense of their potentiality, we are putting them miles ahead of others who are being conditioned and trained through more traditional forms of education to hold themselves in, to conform, and so on, to, I think, rather limited visions of what it means to be human. To be human is to be many things, as these 6 points point out. Expansion of heart, expansion of mind, and expansion of community are key elements in the humanist education. And they are furthered through the practice of virtues, okay, the growing of a neo-humanist rationality or reasoning capacity, and the ability to internalize and reflect on ourselves as completely formed people who are informed by spirit. These are the aspirations, the guiding principles, and also the tools for being, you know, effective neo-humanist educators. I will shut down here, just saying there are 5 resources there. 3 of them are little YouTube talks that I've given on various things, and one is a very short 4-minute read, our Neohumanist love story, which I wrote a couple of years ago, that some of you may be interested in having a look at. So I want to thank you very much for giving me this time, and I hope that what I've said gives you some stimulus to actually hit the road running with some new ideas maybe, or just some increased enthusiasm to know that you're not on your own. There are educators all over the planet seeking to find new ways to build positive, open, and meaningful learning environments. And, you know, of course, Neohumanism doesn't have a monopoly on that, but I think we have an extremely good and well-formed formula for articulating that and making it make sense, not just to ourselves, because we have to believe in it first as teachers, but also to the parents and to the communities that we serve as educators. And we don't have to make sense of the kids. The kids get it. It's often the adults, us, that need to be reminded of what it really means to be fully wondrous, not wonderful, maybe wonderful too, but wondering and wondrous human beings in a cosmos that's just so much more than we ever give it credit for. So thank you very much. Take care.